Welcome.
Hi, welcome.
Hey, we're back.
I know. I think it's been
It's Wednesday again.
yay. Welcome to the live stream.
Oh, did we not do it last week?
We did do it last week, but we weren't together. That's when we did the
Oh,
you
yeah.
phoned me in from my house.
And how did that go?
I feel like it went pretty well. Watching it back, whoa, hold on. Watching it back, I felt like we had decent audio.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
It did it. I forget. Like we did the whole time.
I think so.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
I
Oh,
think
yeah. I
so.
do remember
It seemed
that
like it went
now.
well, and I watched it back and it was like, oh, okay. I don't see comments. I wonder if I'm
Well, no, here, like you being a newbie.
noob.
No, I know they're chat. It's what I like to call the chat doc.
No, very impressive.
There it is. Here, I'll leave it over
Yay!
on your side.
I love reading comments. If you're out there and you feel like saying, hey, if you've got questions about literally anything, throw it in the chat.
Whoa, like where do babies come
I
from?
knew you were going to say that. I literally was like, I almost tried to beat you to the punch.
Why is the sky blue?
Uh, Someone told me it's because it reflects the ocean all the time. I don't know if that's true or not, but someone did say that to me. And I was like, but
I couldn't be
I don't think
because
so.
there's the ocean here.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Because it's so. It is today. And welcome into the chat.
Why is the grass
But we're
green?
not here for like a
Scientific
science.
analysis.
No.
Speaking of analysis,
Yeah, lay it on me.
I don't,
Oh,
I
okay.
don't have anything to say. So we are going to um, be talking in a little. Oh, well, it's 5 o'clock now, so we can
Yay!
start our live stream. So this is the exit, leaving Christianity, and it's for those who are in the process of that or questioning their faith. And it's a place just to hang out, hang out once a week. And we talk about things related to that, to deconstruction, to why someone might be considering leaving Christianity, what that's like. It's what happened to us. And so we just created a place where you can hang out once a week. And
Yeah.
if you're in that situation, I know it can be hard and not necessarily have people to talk to or anything. So
Yeah, we just create, and we are
here we
father
be.
and daughter, for those of you who didn't know. So we just do this together and partly for fun because we like hanging out.
Yeah.
So today's topic is to tithe or not to tithe.
Ooh.
I know it's an interesting one, and probably should start with what tithing is if you're not familiar. If you've deconstructed though from a dogmatic religion, you might be familiar.
Excuse me.
You're excused.
Mm.
But that was actually a junior Bible quiz question when I was in junior Bible quiz, which is as cool as it sounds. You the question was, what is the tithe? And the answer is the answer for junior Bible quiz was 10% of one's income which belongs to God and should be given to the church to support its ministries.
Nice.
Yeah. And in the very fundamentalist Assemblies of God church that I grew up in, that we went to for quite a while, it was taught that you are supposed to give 10% of your income to the church.
Starting point.
Yeah, starting point at minimum.
That's
Yeah.
the minimum. And then offerings and goodwill, just what everything else on top of that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the starting point.
Which is a big ask. That's a lot of money.
Well, it all goes back to obviously if God was, first, if there, we knew who the God was for sure and what he was like. And he was really asking that because he needed that for whatever reason, that would be one thing. But it's the ambiguity, even within Christianity, whether that's something you do or not, and that the Bible's teaching. There are scholarly, uh, critical scholars, Christians even, I would say the New Testament definitely doesn't teach that we have to tithe 10%. they would talk more about. It does talk about generously giving, but it nowhere commands new believers to follow the Old Testament. As a matter of fact, Paul goes into great lengths to say that we're not required to do any of that tithing, and then so some workarounds, based on like the tithing to Melchizedek, which is just an Old Testament. There's not enough.
Yeah.
It's a one-time tithe, and it was a one-time offering to this priest. People like to try to make that like, boy, that was a picture of Jesus, or that actually was Jesus. You'll hear all kinds of crazy stuff, but again, it was never commanded for non-Jews to tithe, give 10% of their income to
Yeah.
the church.
Someone today, when I put this on Facebook and was talking about this topic, someone said, well, Matthew 23:23 commands, Jesus commands that Christians tithe.
Yeet.
And I was like, oh, I don't remember that, but let me look into it. But basically, that story is that Jesus is scolding the Pharisees, like religious leaders, because they were faithfully giving their 10% of, but it wasn't necessarily money. It was like 10% of their different spices and other things. And he was saying, like, you do this, you follow this rule so well, but you don't have justice, love, or mercy, and saying that that was more important. And he does kind of say, paraphrasing, I'm not saying don't tithe.
Yeah, he says you should do the command, and
Yeah.
while doing the other. But again, he's talking to Jewish Pharisees
Yeah.
that were required to follow Old Testament law. That's not a New Testament requirement. As a matter of fact, there in the book of Acts, when there was the uh, Acts, I believe it's chapter 15, when they all met uh, the church leaders met to discuss this new movement and what would be required of the Gentiles, the non-Jews. What are they going to be required? Is it some of the law, all the law? Are they supposed to be circumcised or not circumcised?
Oh,
All those kind of things, and it was settled on like four things that they were being recommended to follow as Paul went and continued to reach non-Jews, and none of them were even laws. It was things they were asking them not to do to not offend uh, Jewish believers' sensibilities or Jewish sensibilities, but it just wasn't required. And why we brought this up? Um, why'd you bring it up, Jess?
yeah. I brought it up because it seemed standard with almost every church that I went to that there was an element of guilt tripping to give your money, and that it was used as, if you don't, God's not going to be as happy with you, or that you will be blessed more if you give money to the church, which I think is, first of all, completely not provable, and second of all, extremely manipulative. And I thought it was important to talk about because I think a lot of people have it's almost a running joke that church can become like a money grab when you go, and that there is a lot of pressure. And I remember even the one that we grew up in, there being like bragging from the pulpit of, oh, it'll be unnamed, and sometimes it wasn't unnamed, but such and such family gave a huge generous donation and God's going to bless them. And I can't think of a worse way to manipulate people than to say, hey, the sky ghost is going to bless you if you give money to our organization. And I don't think there's anything like, I give money to organizations that I believe in, like the ASPCA, the Humane Society type stuff. I give to small amounts, but like monthly. That's normal if people, and that was something that Faith, who is in the chat, pointed out today, is like, it is normal for people to want to give to organizations that they care about and believe in. It's the guilt tripping aspect or the promising some kind of supernatural or even monetary reward for doing it that I think is kind of sick and twisted.
Yeah, and why? And it's one of those things that for me, I don't care if someone does that or not.
Mm-hmm.
But um, my why it was a critical part in my deconstruction process, because tithing was one of the very first things as a believer that I heard from the pulpit, in many pulpits, in many apologetics and Christian sermons on back in the day, it was on the radio, or tapes. People would say, "Hey, did you hear this great message?" Um, and there was a lot of those on tithing, and it was just taught. If this was an actual, just crystal clear something, if you read the Bible, you would come away with understanding God's inerrant word that Christians are supposed to give a minimum of 10% of their income, and then above and beyond that. And it's not. And a lot of times it was actually referred to the Old Testament, which was always crazy because on one hand we're not under the Old Testament law, but on the other hand, here's the examples from where we're supposed to tithe, which is all from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And it was one of those issues that I really dug into. And this was, 30 some years ago that I learned, gosh, not everybody sees this the same. As a matter of fact, there are biblical scholars who understand the culture and the difference between what was required of the Old Testament and the New Testament, what laws were carried over, which were none, according to Paul,
Mm-hmm.
that they just do not believe that tithing was ever called by Jesus or anyone to as a something a New Testament believer had to follow. All the tithing set aside, whether that's true or not, for me, what really struck, because there were times we tithed faithfully and times when we said, I don't, there's just something I'm not really uh, feeling right about this, the way it's being presented and what's being asked. So we did both. But the bigger issue was, it was like, how can something this seemingly important, telling people that I know for a fact the God of the universe through this book is telling you, as a minimum, you have to get 10% of your income to me and the church. And if not, he's not going to be pleased and you're not going to be blessed.
Yeah.
Like something like that, you would have to know, like, that it's crystal clear that's what this book is saying. And to find people who study it earnestly with the understanding of the background, the culture, the languages, come away with very different views on that, really started being a big,
Yeah.
worrisome to me. Like,
It is worrisome. Yeah.
so, and it was one of those chinks, early chinks in the armor of God's inerrant word. It's just his clear revelation of mankind. How could people differ on such an important issue, going to the same book? Who's
Yeah.
right? Who's wrong?
Not only that, but it just seems very convenient that you would pick and choose laws from the Old Testament because thankfully most churches are not enforcing Old Testament laws. That would be a pretty big problem. But the one that pertains to giving money to the church, they're like, no, this one stays. This one's completely applicable. And the New Testament is more about giving generously, giving what you've decided in your heart to give. But I always found that curious that it was like, no, 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 that's the Old Testament. Those are the old laws, except for the one about your money. We still want your money. It just seemed particularly convenient to me.
It's important because it's a powerful thing. Like any church member or leader has power.
Yeah.
Whether it's on a small scale and it's a small church, or it's a large scale, they can have large influence. The large churches, you can have political influence. You can really shape how things are done, even laws
Oh,
and
yeah.
are impacted and stuff. So what I was thinking about earlier this week is one of the things I was always told and always thought was, well, if the disciples didn't know Jesus rose from the grave, and this is kind of a shift, but it's
Oh,
kind of tied in with all that. But if they didn't really see that or know that, why wouldn't they just admit that and fold up camp? And why would they stay with something they didn't believe in? And because they had nothing to gain. And I'm like, well, you have never been to a church, or you've never been to a religious organization or a cult or a religious following.
yeah.
Do people look at those leaders differently? They
Oh, yeah.
treat them differently. They and people like being looked at differently and treated at differently, and that's not something just everybody's going to give up. Maybe because things didn't work out the way they thought they were going to do, they may adjust the story, let the story develop. All you need is one person to carry that truth forward that they want to promote or project, like Jesus rose from the dead. All it takes is one person to say that, and time,
Yeah.
and some distance, and uh, it can happen. And if you don't think it can, I mean, we can just look at uh, Islam or Muslims, um,
Mormons,
Mormons,
LSD, LDS. Yeah.
yeah, like Scientology, like you pick it or name it, name it. Waco,
Jim Jones.
yeah, and it doesn't have to be any even negative ones. Any church, like, think about it. Most Christians think, I won't say most. A lot of Christians that I knew looked at the Roman Catholic Church anywhere from, well, they're not really Christians,
Hmm.
to they are the Antichrist, and it's like the whole
Yeah.
spectrum. But it's not like they look at it like that. Well, if that's true, then how could all those people around the world follow them if it's wrong? If it really is wrong and it's not the truth, well, it just people will believe
Yeah.
non-true things, and massive organizations can develop out of non-true things. So I think it's why we always go
Sure.
back, to the Bible, and do an internal critique to see what does it say, and are these things true. And that takes us all the way back around to the tithing thing. It can't just be that's an important thing, to tell people, to give them your money. And you see that even
Yeah.
like in the early church, in Acts chapter 5, it says the believers were selling their possessions and laying them at the feet of the elders. So
Yeah.
to say, what do these people have to gain if this wasn't true? That, at least that,
Hmm.
followers selling their possessions
That's a really good point.
and laying them at their feet. And that's something,
Yeah.
because these
Yeah.
guys, what, they were going to go back to being fishermen. So, not saying that doesn't uh, demonstrate anything, but when someone says, well, why would they perpetuate that? Well, because there is something to gain by being a religious leader.
Oh, 100%. And
Always.
I've never thought it was a good argument to say, well, what would have caused these people to lay down their lives if they didn't really believe in something that makes it real? But then if you want to accept that, that's fine. But then you also have to accept that there are sects of like the modern day Church of Latter-day Saints where the religious leader, and I've seen this like time and time again from people's personal stories, from the literature, that the leader will tell all the men like, "Oh, you can't have sex with your wives anymore and I'm going to. But I can cuz I'm the prophet." And they will absolutely go along with it and say, "Okay, well, the prophet is saying this." So just because people are willing to do wild things because they believe in something does not just inherently mean that it is true. Or if it does, then you have to be able to accept all of the other religions and their claims if you because there's absolutely people in Islam that have laid down their lives for their belief. And so, does that mean that that's inherently true? There's people, the Jim Jones cult, obviously laid down their lives for their beliefs. That does not mean that it's inherently true.
Yeah. And what we're looking at too is we don't even know, like, we don't have, knowing that the gospels, which are the four accounts, and not knowing who those authors were, we don't even know if there are, like, if we have any eyewitness accounts,
Right, right.
like if these are coming, or they were stories that were developed. And in thinking about it, of course, if you're going to say, well, God inspired them and made them remember all the words and everything, that's one thing. But to just look at any of the gospels and to think that someone was writing those 20, 30, 40 years later, and those were the exact words, like how? And some of them were situations, um, in scenes where no one was even there to hear them or
Right.
to hear what was being said. So to see that it could have been something that was developed over time is not an implausible thought at all. Um,
No, I would again point to like every other
but those are exactly.
religion. And just if you're going to take it with a grain of salt and say, hey, a bunch of people thought this and were willing to go to extreme lengths because of it, it's just not a good argument because there are so many other examples of religions and of groups that have done the exact same thing. And so unless you are willing to validate those beliefs as well, it just doesn't hold up.
In the hardest and in the toughest thing that I learned was that because I was always told, how would these, these 12 disciples, well, less Judas, so the 11 went to their deaths and refused to recant, on Jesus because they were so convinced because of what they saw. And we know today that, and I like one of the most convincing persons you can get that information from is Sean McDowell, Josh McDowell's son, and Josh McDowell wrote Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and then they together rewrote New Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and they corrected or changed and add some things. But one of the in those earlier books, it was well, evidence that demanded a verdict was, hey, these 12 disciples or 11 disciples went to their deaths. So Sean, as his thesis for his, I believe, his PhD, and you can just Google Sean McDowell
Hmm.
martyrdom, and he has now narrowed it down to three, possibly two, that we know with some confidence, and I think that confidence is waning, that they could have died for their faith. So it's not even
Mm.
true. So when you dig into all the critical scholarly information we still have, it goes from 11 to 3. One of those being Paul, one being Peter, if you'd have to believe that some of the things that Peter wrote were from Peter. And the interesting thing about it is, even if those three did die for being Christians, we don't know if it was just Christians were being persecuted and they were given a chance. Like, that's assuming someone
Oh,
actually said, say Jesus is not real and you can live. We don't know if anyone was doing that.
that's a really
They were
good
just
point.
persecuting Christians, and you're a Christian, you're dead.
Right.
So we don't even know, like, if they had a chance to recant or something like that. So it really changed that whole thing. And gosh, it's stuff like that, even along with what I found out about tithing and how different people view that, how the authorship of the Gospels, I just was taught that was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and this was gospel truth. There was
Yeah.
no doubt about it. And you find now biblical scholars don't agree at all that we know who wrote those, and the deaths of the apostles, that was just proof, that these people saw it, and you find out it wasn't. Like,
Yeah.
we don't have that. And all these stories of their deaths all came from much later church traditions and history. Of course, this, like, building this mythology or this
Right.
story. Um, does it say, did it make me say it's not true? No, but it just put enough holes in there to say, gosh, is this something I can know certain enough with all of this uncertainty to be able to tell things like, you're going, tell people you're going to burn eternally
Right.
if you don't believe Jesus, because I know it's that true. No, it's like, because that's a
Right.
horrible thing to tell someone if it's not true.
Or even that you have to give 10% of your
You're
income.
10% of your
That's a
income.
pretty big deal. And I
You're a
mean,
sinner and there's no good in you. You're just born wicked and evil.
yeah,
Like, well,
that it's
only if
wrong.
it's true. Like, I could tell
Right.
someone that if I knew that it was true, but um, they just keep finding out more and more. Like,
Right.
as we learn more and more and find new manuscripts and all of that.
I think the problem too with any guilt tripping is uh or manipulation and persuasion, like telling people that you would be blessed if you
Yeah.
gave your money. I think a problem with that too is the disillusionment that it left people with, that it sets them up for success. Like, oh, I'm doing this faithfully. And then when something happens to them, it's like genuinely they're surprised because you are
Yep.
being told from the leaders in your church that if you tithe and give your money, that you're going to be literally like financially
Yeah.
blessed. And then if you're not, instead of going, oh yeah, I understand why you're disillusioned, the answer might be, well, you've been blessed in other ways, and that's not measurable and that's not quantifiable, and it's kind of just weaseling around the issue of like, well,
The weasel factor.
it's the weasel factor, and it's not like a big vending machine that you put stuff in and you get stuff out. But I literally had friends like in the really Assemblies of God very fundamental church I grew up in that said, wow, I gave, like as a kid, like a 10, 12 year old, I gave 10% of my allowance to the church. Someone said this to me. And then later that week, I found a $20 bill on the sidewalk. So God was blessing me for tithing.
Praise him.
And I was like, well, that could be a number of things. I mean, and just, but how damaging is that mentality that, like, oh, if I do this, good things are just going to continue to happen in my life? That it's such a stress. It is so harmful
And
to set people up for that. It's very
it's
damaging.
usually things taken out of context and not, read it all. Just
Yeah.
that is the key. If you read it all and take it all as a whole together, you certainly find out it's not a univocal voice, or there's not a it's not
Mm-mm.
this carrying on theme that everything matches up. You find out it's not at all.
Yeah.
And then but it's taught that way. But one of the things too is that if I was being taught that God would bless me financially, and all my needs would be met, he would take care of me,
Aw.
if I tithed and gave that to him first, then that would have to be a universal truth. So I mean, we could literally wipe out world hunger.
Yeah.
Like, you could go to Christian nations right now, African nations, where there are strong sectors of Christianity where children are dying of starvation.
Yeah.
And just teach those parents, like, all you've got to do, hey, if you have a all you own is, and all your income is whatever, 5 beans, give one of those beans to God, and your child's not going to die. You guys are not going to starve.
Right. It's
the
offensive.
it's just not even practical, because if it worked for us in America, it has to be true for everybody everywhere. And there are faithful people that have done that it just doesn't bear out that you uh,
Yeah.
give God something and then he's going to do something back.
And I can almost guarantee you that no pastor is going to be like, oh, well, that means that no pastor is going to say, oh, well, I guess the tithing blessing connection didn't work. So you probably should stop tithing if you're in dire straits financially. That isn't really the sentiment. It's more like, oh, well, he's blessing you in other ways that are unseen. And it's very patronizing because people are in financial distress. And even it was never really said either very often, like, hey, unless you like have a young family and you're struggling to feed your kids, then you probably should like focus on them and maybe not give thousands of dollars to the church. That was never, it was like, no, then especially you should, because blessed are the people that have less and give more. And then it was the story of the woman who gave very little, but it was like everything she had, and oh, she was so much more blessed. So it's manipulative and it's not practical either.
Yeah. Look, look at that comment.
Okay, really weird says that New Testament attitude on giving is so nasty. Jesus saw an old woman with only a single fucking penny to her name and was like, see, everyone, this lady gets the message. Mine. That's exactly what I was just talking about. That's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah. And then he's like, screw you, rich guy. It would be harder for you to enter heaven than a camel to go through the eye of a needle because you have wealth. But then also, Christians will teach like the prosperity gospel. So it doesn't really,
Yeah,
I
this right here is the idea of tithing, is that God will bless you, and
yeah,
you give more and he'll be pressed down, double, whatever. I can't remember all the things that used to say
I've
about how
blocked them out. Yeah.
how blessed you'd be, but if it was true, like if it was verifiably true across the board in all situations, like it wouldn't even be a question. Like it's just not true. That's
Yeah.
not, there's not a someone in the sky doubling your income if you give him, um, because it would have to be applicable in every situation to every person, and this just does not
No.
play out that way.
That's really good because that I remember people that I knew were generous tithers like growing up, because they would talk about it and were literally in, I think, I don't know if it was foreclosure on their home, but like things were getting fairly dire. And so even just that, like, okay, so
And it's all kinds of reasons too. Like if someone, um, first of all, if you're taught that from an early age, you might also be being like, because that's some disciplined personality, like to say, hey, I'm going to take 10% and give it to church because God said so, and that's the right thing to do. Just to do that takes some discipline. Period. Is that person also disciplined, taking 10% and putting in savings every week? Also, I don't know. Like you don't know what's going on in every situation.
yeah, that's a great point.
Of tithers. But if you just are disciplined in anything, and um, someone who I would say is disciplined enough to do that may also be a disciplined saver and a disciplined taking another 10% of their savings.
Yep.
If you follow someone like Dave Ramsey, I believe that's what he tells you to do.
Yeah.
And there's people like that that have just always been had more discipline for all kinds of reasons and don't have family, or they were raised that way from a very early beginning. I remember me and mom becoming Christians in our late 20s, and it's like, well, we heard that and we're like, what? Like what? You
It's
do
a
what? Like,
fair
do you realize
reaction.
like we have always and we tried and we many times like tried that, but what we found out was like, gosh, what's responsible and what's not, because we weren't the most responsible people prior to that with our income. So it was like we
Same.
wanted to get things right and we wanted to get out of debt and take care of those things, but it's like we were really, we weren't making a lot of money, and so we really struggled. And there were times where we gave when it hurt, and
Yeah.
um, and that was always the thing. Like I'd get this I got this check in the mail that was the exact amount I needed to be able to pay this bill, and that's because I tithe. And um
I
anecdotal.
rem- but riddle me this. Since I've become an atheist, that sort of thing has happened too.
Yeah,
Where,
yep.
oh, I got retro pay from California from when I was based out there, and I was not a Christian at the time, and it was just enough to cover what I needed done on my car. So then, would you call that a coincidence, or it was a if that can happen to an
It
atheist,
just
then I
happens.
think it might just it might just be a thing that happens. And here's something I thought of earlier because I give to like animal charities that will send a breakdown of here's what your money goes to when you donate to this organization. And I was thinking about that for churches that I had given money to that I never, some do, I think, but there were plenty that I never saw a breakdown of here's specifically what your donation's going to. And there were churches that I've been to that would suddenly have really high tech, no joke, like smoke machines for worship, really expensive instruments, really expensive electronic equipment, stages. Um, the pastor might drive an Escalade or something like that. And so I wonder if it's required of churches, maybe to show the congregation a breakdown of when they give money, what's it going to? I think that'd be fair.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think sometimes it's like all lumped in, like
Yeah.
maybe like staff, and that might be they don't break out individual, but I think some may. Like again, here's what I always thought. Like it goes back to me, the whole thing, I could care less if someone believes tithing is accurate and
Yeah.
that's what the Bible is saying and that's what they want to do. It's just not saying that. The Bible does not tell you to do that as a believer in Christ. It tells you to give generously, but not all. It doesn't even say always. It says set aside an amount in your heart that you I forget how it's worded, but it's basically self-reflecting what makes sense in my situation, which makes more sense.
Yeah, it
Like
does.
what is right and what can I do to give to the needy, to the other people? Like there is like some people could possibly choose to give it all and live as a pauper and say anything I make is just going out. Others give a lot, but they live in very very nice homes and locations and have clothing and all that, and they could cut that in half, so there's never an amount that's enough. That's why I think it has to be what a person settles on their heart and their own conscience. But I think the bigger thing is I just don't believe it's true. Like
And that's, I think, what our problem is because,
it's not
on,
being, and then when it's being told and being forced that this is what God's telling you, that's the problem area,
yes,
because it's manipulation, because the Bible's not saying that. And if it is saying that, how can, again, scholarly, faithful Christians
yeah.
come away with different viewpoints on it? Someone, and if God is not the author of confusion but of clarity,
Hmm.
and really wants to communicate with us and wants to, how can we be having this discussion, right?
I no,
Like,
completely agree. And if anyone out there, if you're in the space of, because I was there for years, of still going to church, maybe one foot in, one foot out the door, and there is any kind of guilt tripping for your money, guilt tripping's wrong across the board, period, whatever it
yeah,
is. And if you do feel like guilty about it, that's a great indication, like your radar's up, good for you, that that is the wrong thing to do. If anyone's ever guilt tripping you, period, it's just not, that is not okay. And it is manipulative if someone with authority is telling you, give your money and you'll get good things, your life will improve, you'll be blessed. That's just pure manipulation because they want your money,
yeah.
which is kind of gruesome.
And I experienced that part myself.
Yeah,
What I think a lot of times um, Christians or people don't understand, and it's why this space is here. Like if you are
yeah,
deconstructing or you have the same questions, because I had these questions, and it was so hard to talk to people about it. A lot of times, the initial response is, "Well, you need to check your heart, Brian.
ugh,
What is it you're so fearful of? You don't understand. I was sold out. I was doing more reaching out, starting ministries, trying to reach the hurting
literally, yeah,
without much. We didn't have a lot. I was willing to do whatever. But what I did want to know is when I saw competing ideas and conflicting, contradictory information in the Bible, I wanted to know what was true and what was being said and what, so I was doing the right thing. That was it.
yeah,
And it was so frustrating because so often I'd get those kind of answers and responses like, "Oh, you just want it for yourself." It's like,
that's so gross.
it is gross.
Yeah, yeah,
It is so insulting. It's like it's hard for Christians to believe that someone. It's the same thing about deconstructing. Like I think someone uh, posted on your
yeah.
Facebook or something today about like, oh my gosh, you guys were so active in ministry and so loved God. What must have happened? What must have happened to make?
Mm-hmm.
I read the Bible. It was it. Like it was searching to seek to prove that it was true to myself, not to prove that it was wrong. I wanted to know that it was true because it was easier to know that there
Yeah.
is a God that loves me and this is all true. But I just kept reading so many things, Old, New Testament, that did not line up, that did not make sense.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's what led me away.
I think it is so hard for people to believe. I even, this one lady, like I stopped having a back and forth with on Facebook because she goes, "You're angry at God and the people in church hurt you." And I was like, I'm not angry at God in the same way I'm not angry at Santa Claus. I don't think he's real. I have no feeling, in fact, about God except that I
Yeah.
think that the story of him has harmed people. Um, but even as I said, like, no, there was nothing catastrophic that happened in church. There were bad instances with people. And I think that is a good enough reason if someone wanted to walk away, and that gets so downplayed. But then somebody again today said, "Wow, did something horrible happen to you at church that made this happen to you guys?" And I'm like, My response, I think, was really polite, but I just said it wasn't anything catastrophic. It was literally reading the Bible, and it was logic. And just the more that I learned, the more I couldn't make myself believe something that did not make sense to me. But I think it is easier for people who
to
who
think.
believe to think, oh, something bad just happened to you. And I really wish people would stop downplaying that too. Let's say something bad does happen to you at church or because of a church. It Okay, that's a
It would
good
probably shatter your belief for a long time, man. Like if
yeah.
you've been
And that's a good if you get assaulted, if you get taken advantage of, if you get scammed, if you're hurt by people there,
spiritually manipulated, like,
that's a good reason to leave. That's a great reason to reevaluate and say, these are the people who, if the Bible says the Holy Spirit lives
yeah,
inside you when you get saved. And if this is how those people are acting, maybe it's a good firsthand indicator that it's not real, or if you're like, wow, the people in church aren't much different than everybody else, maybe maybe it's not such a deep thing. Maybe it's just like, oh, maybe it's just people are people across the board, and the Holy Spirit really isn't
yeah.
living in them. And I don't care if somebody were to say, like, no, I think it's all real and stuff. That's completely fine. I just think it's very
You allow
insulting.
that?
I allow it. Yeah, by the grace of, by First Thessalonians 6:66 says,
Oh my
by the power of me and Groob.
Dumo.
But I think it's insulting when people, instead of asking you like, "Hey, how did you get to this deconstruction?" and the point that you think this, people will say, "You were hurt by, you're angry at," and will just tell me how I feel and what I think, even if it's completely inaccurate.
Yeah. Mine was really the questions that uh, I used to think there weren't answers to, and then I started learning and reading more and realized, oh gosh, biblical scholars have had answers to these for 1,000 years. Like these are not new questions I'm bringing up. They church was wrestling with this, within 400 years of after Christianity. And that's why there were sects and different groups breaking off, and
Oh yeah.
um, because people have always questioned these, and you can see how a lot of it developed over time. But
Mm-hmm.
um, me and Jess are pretty different on this. Like she's like you would say like there's just no way, right? There's anything.
I would say no, actually I would say there's no way that the God of the Bible is real. That's what I would say. And I would say my personal feeling is that there's probably not some kind of creator. However, I absolutely can't prove that, and if there was any proof, I'm open to that. But
Yeah.
I don't say no, there's 0% that there's a God. I think there's 0% that there's a Bible God from what I have studied, and certainly a loving biblical God. Certainly not.
Yeah.
But go ahead. What with
No, I
how
think
you
that's where I realized that's more myths and stories and beliefs, people trying to understand God as best
Yeah.
they can. New Testament, Old Testament, I do believe that's what it was. Which I mean, I've heard people say that's a reason or proof for God, that people from the beginning of the time have had some kind of spirituality. Well, dude, it's because we're finite. If we are evolved creatures, with as soon as we have uh, consciousness and we can think and reason, which is our great evolutionary uh, feature that has allowed us to rise to the top of everything. Yeah, once we're allowed to reflect on the world around us and we realize we're mortal, of course we would probably start thinking
Yeah.
like we need something bigger because we don't want it just to be this short time. So the fact that like people have always thought there has to be something greater or more seems like you would,
Of
because
course.
facing the other is like, oh, we're just here for a short time and that's it.
But people have always thought that there were ghosts. There's always
Yeah.
been a group of, and
But I still think there's something. I still want to believe there's something
oh yeah.
beyond this, because it does go by so fast.
Oh
Now, but
yeah,
that to
absolutely.
me,
Me too.
my wanting it to doesn't make anything true or not true. It's that I understand that's a want, and that's where I think faith is a wonderful thing. Like, but it was never taught to me like that. If someone had said,
Mm.
here's what Christianity is. This is a faith. Like these are stories that were passed down, but these are what we believe in because as humanity, we want hope for something beyond this and there's
Yeah.
something greater. And if it didn't teach vile, harmful things like everyone's born sinful and you're going to burn if you don't believe in this God, but if it was like there really is a loving God and that's what our faith says, and we believe in that. No, we can't prove it. I'd be like, dude, I could probably go there.
Yes,
Like, right? I could
completely
probably
open.
go and say, because I want hope and faith that there's something beyond this.
Yes.
And I'd be enough to say, yeah, I can't prove it. I don't know. And probably it may not be. Who knows? But that's okay because we do, as long as it wasn't making me uh not live this life to the fullest, because everything's about this afterlife and this is all a test and this doesn't really matter and suffering doesn't matter. And,
This is the dress
it's like,
rehearsal. That's what would get said in church all the time is that
yeah,
this life is the dress rehearsal. So then why put your 100% into it?
this is the one I know for sure that I have.
Mm.
So I do want to make this one count. Uh, and to count can be loving my daughter and my son and my wife as much as I can, and
Yeah.
and her boyfriend and the people that are in my circle and my mom and my brothers and whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
And Gruber.
it doesn't have to be anything enormous or huge because I'm here, and I hear that said all the time. Like,
Yeah.
what's the meaning? What's the point? Well, the point is, even if there was proven to be no God, I'm still here for a
Yeah.
limited amount of time, and I'm alive, and I have this opportunity in history to do in my circle as much as I can or as little as I can. But it's
Yeah.
up to me. This is, and I just think, what if I was taught that from the time I was born? Life is precious.
Yes.
And this is our life we have. And it's different for everyone. There's no rhyme or reason because it's nature and people get sick sooner. Sometimes people get diseases. Sometimes people, even a-holes, they live a long life. We don't,
Always,
it's
yeah.
just the draw, it's just nature.
Yeah.
But with whatever time you have, it's beautiful. Make it as wonderful as you can. Make
Oh
it
my
as
gosh,
meaningful
yeah.
as you can.
Be
Like,
kind to things that are weaker than you.
people are like, what would be the point? Because it's the only life we have. And
I guess what's the alternative then? Like,
yeah, I would
if-
say, oh, okay, there is no God. I'm born. I hate everything. Just kill me now.
yeah.
Well, I guess, but I don't think we think that way because there is something about us being beings with a conscience that when we're born, like we have this able to think and reason. It's like we do as it develops. Like, well, I like other people like around me that are nice and warm to me, and and I don't want to harm them, and I don't want them to harm me. And
Yeah.
then you take that outside of your group. I don't want to harm other groups. What can I do to make this place that I'm in as positive? Well, what's the point? You're going to die. Well, because I'm here now. And
Yeah.
for that time, I could make it that way for me and my family. And for the ones that come after me, make it a little better.
And isn't it that much more important and meaningful then if it is more limited? And I don't know. I think that it's going to sound really weird, but I was kind of relieved when I became an atheist and stopped believing in a heaven and a hell. And I really think that there could be something. There could be, who knows? I can't prove it. It's probably not. There could be some altered state of consciousness after you die. There could be a spirit. I have no idea, but I do
You
not.
don't know.
I don't know, but I do think that there's not a heaven and a hell. Like, there's just no way. And to me, that was kind of a relief because some of the best people I knew who had passed away were atheists. And so when I believed in that, it was like, well, I'm never going to see them again because hopefully I go to heaven. Hopefully. That was always kind of like a fingers crossed. In fact, I have this meme that I think mom sent me, and it is so funny, but it was like a Victoria's Secret angel and kind of like lingerie, and she had big angel wings and sunglasses, and it was captioned, "Me arriving in heaven when everyone thought I'd be in hell." And she was like, "This is you." Kaboom, I've arrived. But I think I was.
Oh, you nasty sinner.
I know. But that was even when I believe, I was like, that's really funny. Everyone's going to be shocked. They're like, the double divorcee? Could it be? I'm like, mm-mm. But anyway, I was sort of
You're
relieved.
just giving people fuel.
I know.
Like, oh, that's why she's all the time.
Yeah, I know.
But
that's okay. I don't mind. But I I don't mind the fuel. I know people will argue with me on Facebook, I think, because it's easier to argue like over the
I should
computer to be a keyboard warrior, but I have not really had anyone argue to my face.
No, I don't either. Like most people are pretty nice about it, and
Yeah.
I don't try to obviously debate, and
No.
would never like want to impact someone's belief unless they if they ask me or because of this or they just ask me in passing. I mean, I had a nephew say, "Hey, because you're the Bible guy, like
Yeah.
I'm new to Christianity and I want to get together." I mean, I'm going to get together, but before we do, I'm going to let him know, like, "Hey, I you may not have heard, like, it's over the last 8 years I really transitioned out of that, and my beliefs are different now.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to discourage you if you're looking for someone who's going to, um, believe the Bible is the Word of God and it's all accurate and all that. You would probably want to talk to a pastor
Yeah.
or someone, not me, because I don't want to discourage someone.
No, I don't want to argue. The only time I think that I would probably engage with somebody, and I have, it is if they're saying something that's actively harming somebody else. I and I would have no problem because I've heard people say like, "Oh, that
A lot of Christianity is harmful,
it is,
like the
it
ideas it
is,"
teaches, like
and I've just
like
said
on a lot of levels. I mean, I know it does good, but it is on a lot of
there's
levels.
a lot of baggage associated, like a lot. I think what people maybe from the outside who aren't actively in Christianity don't see is the inherent deep judgment all the time and the criticalness of the religion of like the way that you dress, the way that you act. Are you too prideful? Are you too? And those are
Well,
the
just that
times,
you're sinful by nature. There's no good in you.
and that's just the
Like
basis.
what?
That is the, I mean, and
That's
I've
not
gotten to
true.
an argument with somebody about this because I said, I think that Christianity comes with an inherent baggage, which is harmful. And they were like, no, that's terrible. And I was like, well, the whole basis is if you don't believe in exactly this correct thing, you get tortured for all of eternity. There's no way that that does not come with baggage of some kind of fear, some kind of guilt in any
Or
relation
shame,
or
like
shame. Yeah.
what's inherently wrong with me at my core. In
Yes. Yes.
like Catholic, I was raised Catholic, so um uh again, I was never did a deep study in it, but I mean, I just heard it constantly and went to catechism and all that. So my
Mm,
understanding is why we were all baptized as infants right away is because if you died as an infant, you need to be baptized
oh my
to be
gosh.
saved, to not go to punishment. Like even like what? Because you are born with
That's so
original
crazy.
sin, and
Yeah. That's crazy.
it is like to
To
think
think
that
that a
like
baby, well, it's not crazy if you remove loving God.
well, I
If
wouldn't
you,
say crazy because I wouldn't want to insult anybody, but that's
well, it's
would
crazy
be a
to
good
say
weird. What would
it
be a good word?
crazy.
Yeah,
And here's where it's crazy is if you
I'd
say
say prove it.
it's a loving God, but an infant, if they died, would go to hell if they weren't splashed with water. When you look at it that way, that's okay. We won't say crazy. That's wild. If it's
Yeah,
a loving God, if it's an indifferent God or a vindictive God, fine,
yeah.
absolutely.
And people saying that. Well, have you ever seen kids? You just well, yeah. Like the fact that as a child's mind develops and their first uh instincts or everything are survival and it's about me, and the mind hasn't developed cognitively outside of themselves to even understand others are separate from them and all that, just
Yeah.
because they pull toys and they say mine isn't like that. That has been, I've heard that so many times. That's evidence that they're sinful.
No, that is just
Like instead
psychological
of
development.
like
That's all
that's
like cognitive development. Like you're saying is I think it's for the first 8 to 10 years that there is not the concept of how things that I do impact other people and they can repeat. So if you teach them like, "Oh, you don't grab stuff," they can learn that kind of association with like, "Oh, I don't grab stuff from people." But the empathy and compassion that develops not for
yeah.
people are different, but as a general, I learned about this in college psychology. As a generalization, that first several years, there's not even the concept
Wait, let's
of.
pause for the train. Let's not close we are to the track. Oh, sorry, it already went by. Yeah,
But to call that normal psychological development and to call that sin, I would just say will prove that that's sin and not just the way that human beings
Developmental.
develop. Yeah.
And when it's called sin, like that does have an impact on your psyche. Like, I
Yes.
am sinful.
Yes.
I am shameful. I need forgiveness for being me, being born the way I am. That if it were true, awesome. But if not, wow, what some what a thing to tell
Whoa.
people. Like,
Yeah.
like
You better be pretty darn sure. And I think that you and I have both agreed that if it was presented like pastors that go to seminary and actual like learn the scholarly truths of the Bible and what it was actually saying, if they were presented like it's not non-contradictory, it absolutely contradicts itself. There's a lot of horrific stuff in it. We're cherry picking the nice parts, and that's what we're building the religion around. And you can buy into that if you want to. That would be so much better because at least that's truthful and honest. But they won't like. I've never been to a church that will talk about like, hey, do you remember the time that God commanded cannibalism as a punishment for people to eat their own children? Like, there's just stuff that will
oh,
literally never get brought up.
I have, but like
Really?
that's God's. That's how much He hates sin and disobedience. Like,
So weird.
I know, like how, like you'd even defend that.
Whoa.
Like, God, that is like just over the top.
Then you really don't want to go to the church luncheon because you're like, this pastor's into some weird stuff.
But we, yeah, like I wasn't in, I was not in where Mom and I got saved. Fortunately, it wasn't like the real fire and brimstone type
The
stuff.
Lord.
But
Oh,
it was all those teachings that of the Bible, like of the old school
yeah.
AG, that were I think damaging and not true. They're just not accurate.
Yeah.
And that was a
I agree.
problem when I would go to the Bible and work through that.
Yeah.
That's where I still just find I'm so grateful for some of the online people that do those live streams that talk about it, because it was so very, it was so what's the word when like you think something, you think you're nuts, but then you hear somebody,
Validating.
yeah, perfect. It was
Yes.
like, okay, I wasn't crazy. Those are the exact same thoughts.
Yes.
I was seeing the same things, and like, so that was our tithing, man. We got all the way, we went all over the board on that one.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone saw my Facebook story promoting this, but I used the song "Pay Me What You Owe Me" by Rihanna, and I thought that was so clever. Don't act like you forgot. Pay me what you owe me. I thought that was so funny to talk about tithing. Bitch better
Wait, did
have
you just
my
call
money.
yourself clever?
Yep, try life. Every once in a while, I got a good one.
that
I
was
was
that was
literally
a good one.
laughing to myself on the couch creating that Facebook story.
You like, because she shared with me a post someone said about tithing or what happened to us and all
Yeah,
that, and read me her response. Because I'm not on Facebook, and I have a Facebook thing, but I
very seldom it's
very
on.
seldom look at it, and I
Yeah.
actually don't have it on my phone anymore. But um, uh, yeah, it was so good. Like, your response was just
Oh,
so
thank
like
you.
tactful and clear, and because it
Aw.
was really just explain this isn't um, because something bad happened. And like, some people close to me know, like, I've had some health problems over the last year. This whole thing started close to 8 years ago. The whole
Yeah.
deconstruction process had nothing to do with what's going on right now. And I've got the same amount of comfort from family that and friends through this than I used to get from God, because it was
Yeah.
none, because he was not there. Like,
Yeah.
um, people people are comforting and encouraging, but um, those are the kind of things where, gosh, if there really was comfort or healing of those kind of things on a real consistent basis, where there weren't cancer clinics and all of that, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Nope.
Everybody would know, like, okay, like,
Someone
we
didn't give their
know,
10% to God.
yeah, we would know. We wouldn't be having this discussion. It'd be like, there is no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to wrap that all up with a nice bow to your point,
Bow it up.
I'm going to bow it up.
Vote, vote.
Our problem is teaching like a whole group of people from the pulpit, from a position of power, you have to give 10% of your money to God or else is gross and sick. And don't let anybody tell you that because it's wrong.
That's her position. Mine is I don't care if you're questioning that and thinking
Yes.
and you're reading the Bible and saying I don't get this, or you're like something instinctively saying something doesn't seem right about this. I'd say you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Keep
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
reading, keep researching. I mean, I just did a quick AI search because I was just curious.
I wanted to.
And I got kind of equal amounts. Like, well, what I typed in was something like, do biblical scholars is the peer reviewed biblical scholar consensus that Christians are required to tithe? The answer was no, like no, and it went on to say how that was Old Testament, and talked about some uh, evangelical fundamentalists believe that those are because of one place that Jesus said something that it is commanded. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. So you can dig into that yourself and see what you find. If you go to apologetic websites, which are meaning evangelical fundamentalist apologists who make those cases for the doctrines and the dogmas that they hold, of course they're going to do it. But I'd say also look at peer reviewed biblical scholarship. What's so powerful about peer review is someone writes, whether it's in any field, someone writes an idea or puts together scholarly work, presents it to their peers, and the peers tear it apart. And if it's
Yeah.
wrong, everyone knows because they show with evidence, oh, you got this wrong, you got this wrong. When something's peer reviewed multiple times and it's all like, yeah, this is kind of what we all are also seeing, that's what the people trained in that area are seeing.
Yeah.
And these are Christians too. Like there are Christians involved in that too. So it's not like, well, they don't have the Holy Spirit. They can't really
Oh
understand
my
it.
God. Yeah.
It's
That
that's
makes me cringy. That would be a fun
another
thing to talk
topic
about.
next
Yeah.
week. Okay. Well, we're just about done.
Yeah.
So
Anyone questions or concerns or
um,
comments, feel free to throw them in the
if
chat.
you do have the need to tie this something, you send it to Jessica's Facebook post.
Yeah.
We were only asking for 9.9% of.
Oh. I was gonna say 8. It was
Whoa.
feeling really generous.
JK. And we will see you next week.
Yay. Bye.
Bye.
Boom 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 boom.
That was good.
Yeah, it was fun.
I'll have to watch this for
I
sure.
definitely want to. I'm curious.